Physicist Farmgal. This is a podcast that is about my crafting. I knit, I crochet, I sew, I quilt, I make baskets. I like to do all the crafts, and so I'll talk a little bit about each one of those things each week, and also share with you what I'm working on. And also, this is a podcast that covers science because I am a tenured full professor of astrophysics at a local university, and I teach classes that range from the general education physical science class that everyone has to take to senior level astrophysics and meteorology classes. Plus, I volunteer to do women in STEM programs and planetarium shows for local school groups or community groups. And then last but not least, I am a third generation family farmer where I own my family farm of 170 acres, which is in the foothills of the Arkansas Ozarks. And I raise grass-fed beef cattle. I also have raised Appaloosa and paint horses. And I'm also a haven to some rescued donkeys, miniature horses, and a miniature mule named Pumpkin who thinks she rules a roost. I have show quality rabbits and heritage poultry, and I'm also fur kid mom, as you can tell from my co-host here, Willie, to 14 dogs, 5 indoor cats, and an undetermined number of outside cats. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I want to welcome you to our podcast. If you're a returning viewer, I sure am proud you're coming back, and if you're a new viewer, welcome to the Funny Farm. I hope you find something that you find entertaining here. And otherwise, let's carry on and get started with episode number 14 of Diary of a Physicist Farmgal. Okay, if you're looking for us on social media, my farm Facebook page is the same as my YouTube channel name. It is Buckthorn Farms. And I thought I would tell you a little bit about why it's named that. Obviously, I like it because it's the same initial as my last name. The B is the same initial as my first letter of my last name. And also, if you read in some herbal lore, the buckthorn berry, the Celts believed gave you the ability to communicate telepathically with horses. And I have been a lifelong horse fanatic. I think a lot of little girls go through a phase where they love horses, and I never outgrew it. And I'm going to share a poem or a reading with you in the farm section about that. But I thought, well, that'd be a great name for a farm, because I had these big dreams of being a horse farmer and raising horses when I moved back home. Unfortunately, the way you make a small fortune raising horses is you start with a big fortune. So that didn't work out. But anyway, you can find us on Facebook at Buckthorn Farms. I share a lot of farm information, pictures, and also just some different ideas and articles and things that are important. I'm a big advocate for growing local, eating local, and trying to take care of this planet. So you can go there. On Instagram and on Ravelry, you can find me as Doc Firewoman, which I'll put all that information in the down bar. And then also there is a Ravelry group for the podcast. I haven't checked it the last little bit. I need to get on there and look at it. But please go over there and check it out. And if you like the video, please subscribe to my channel and like the videos. Please leave a comment. I love to know who's listening. And that way it'll kind of raise our profile a little bit here. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So if you're checking us out, we also have a charity make-along going on. It ends on July the 2nd, which is coming up quicker than I'd like to think because it's my 49th birthday. But anyway, so we are doing a charity make-along where you can create any item to donate to a charity. You can knit, you can sew, you can crochet, you can quilt. I don't care. And the charity is a pretty loose term. I'm going to make a couple of lap quilts. I've worked on my second one, and I need to get them finished up to donate to my local hospice house. There are people that are making comforters for cat cages for a local animal rescue group. There are people that are crocheting cancer kicking critters for kids who are having to deal with cancer. There are people making hats for preemie babies. There's all kinds of things. Local is, to me, is best. Think globally, act locally is kind of my motto. So yeah, so go check that out. There are going to be some prizes. I've talked about those a few times, so I won't do that again here, but there are going to be some prizes. There's some patterns, there's some skeins of yarn, and some beautiful project bags. So please go check those out. I'll link all the information, the people who have donated those, down in the down bar. So go thank our generous donors, and I hope to see you over there on the Ravelry group. So we're going to get on down the road here with some finished objects. Okay, before I started with my FOs, Wally decided he would like to come up and say hello. He came in today while I was recording. He was one of my last adoptions. I picked him up one day at a pet adoption thing that I probably foolishly volunteered at, but I guess it was meant for me to be there. I was there volunteering at a local pet adoption event, and most of the groups that were there were no-kill rescues, but unfortunately the local, well, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately, the local pound was there, and they tried very hard to be no-kill, but unfortunately, living in the South, there is a huge, overwhelming wave of animals that are abandoned or strays, and so they were full, and they were doing a special rate of adoption that day, and Wally came home with me because I saw his sweet little gray face, and he is a very sweet little boy. You can tell he's had some serious trauma in the past, though, because loud noises scare him to death, and he is terrified of storms. Even with a thunder shirt on, he's scared to death. But anyway, so Wally wanted to hop up here before I started FO, so let me put him down. Okay, jump down. You're good. Oh, I know. There you go. Okay. So, on FOs, I've got a few things that I have finished. First of all, I made another little Wonder Woman hat. Now, this one's quite a bit smaller, you'll notice. My good friend Carol recently had her first grandchild, and I thought, she's a little girl, and I thought, well, let's get this child started out right in the world by giving her a Wonder Woman hat. So I'm actually going to see Carol tomorrow, and we're going to go gandering, as we call it, which means we just kind of pick a direction on the map and we drive and we see what we can see. She usually tells her husband, we're going to be somewhere between a Little Rock, which is in the middle of the state, and the Arkansas state line to the west, and somewhere in that half of the state or in the east half, who knows. We just go out gandering, as we call it, like a goose gander walks around and looks. That's kind of what we do. So, and we found some cool things that way. So I'm going to give this to her tomorrow. All right, so this was a quick little pattern. This is by Bean Sprout Boutique on Ravelry, and it was very quick to make up. I think I made this in like an hour, and it took almost no yarn. You can use scrap yarn. I didn't read on the pattern that I was supposed to actually use a smaller crochet hook to make my little star, but I like big stars, right? Because I'm an astrophysicist, so the stars need to be big. So the little Wonder Woman hat for my friend Carol's little grandchild. Then I made a basket. Now, you remember I showed the basket last time that I gave to my neighbor Connie because I had gotten the wrong handle. Well, I got the right handle, and this is what the gathering basket should have looked like. Okay, you'll notice that the handle goes long ways across the basket instead of this, this way. All right, so this is a garden gathering basket. Now, this is a free pattern. It is on the Missouri Basket Weavers Association website, so I will link that below. They have a ton of different free patterns on there, and some of them are rated by difficulty. There's some really cool things on there that are not baskets too. Like, for example, there is a decoration, a fall decoration that's ears of corn that are woven. I'm going to make that. It was beautiful, so that's going to be one of the things that I make. But this is my garden gathering basket. I believe this is called Karen's garden basket or gathering basket. All right. And I just did a 5-color chain on the side there. All of these supplies were purchased from NC Basket Works. I believe it's called Suzanne Moore's NC Basket Works, but North Carolina Basket Works. And then I made this one evening when I was sitting down. I think I made it Sunday evening. After a full day of farm stuff, I decided I would make myself a basket. All right, so it's got the chicken feet fillers in it. You can see there at the bottom and the top. It's got the chicken feet. The handle goes all the way across the bottom. and then I did a double lashing on the top for strength. Okay, so that was my gathering basket, and this is mine. I'm not giving this one away, but I've got another handle like this that I'll make as a gift, I'm sure, for somebody, but that one's mine. Okay, the last thing that I finished was my little bear. Now remember, I had showed the little bear, the little Christmas bear that I was going to make, so here he is all finished. Yay! Okay, I've still got a few little things to clip and clean up on him, but I finished him. So he's got his little coat on with a little fur embellishments. I glued some Christmas buttons on. I put his little eyes. He's got his little hat with a pom-pom on it here. Okay. And he just sits, you know, on your table or whatever, on a side table or shelf as a decoration. So I finished a little bear. This was a printed panel from Cranston VIP. Now I did make a couple of little mistakes on him here, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of cleaning up with my fabric paint. I'm a menace with fabric paint because I get impatient and I touch it before it's dry. But anyway, so there is my little bear. You can see his little coat here. Okay, and I put sort of little decorations on the little figures on the coat. And then I've got to clean up the fur and everything off of him, get all the stray fur off of him. And then he will go in my entries for the county fair, because we're coming up to fair time. You know, now we're in major getting ready for the fair mode. I'm starting to weigh the rabbits. I'm starting to think about the birds, you know, the conditioning on the birds and everything. And starting to make my list and check it twice of things that I want to enter in the county fair. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that as we draw closer to the time in mid-September. But anyway, so I finished my little bear. I thought he was just as cute as he could stinking be here. And yeah, so there's my last finished object for this week, my little VIP Cranston Patchwork Christmas teddy bear. So, okay, so now we're going to move on to works in progress. Okay, so I'm going to show you first my sewing, one of my sewing works in progress. If you follow me on Instagram, you have seen this. It's a patchwork turkey panel. Okay, this is another printed panel from VIP Cranston. Okay, and I am up to the point where I am stuffing the body on the turkey. It just makes me laugh every time I look at him. I've sewed the tail on and I'm stuffing the body. I've got to stuff it a little more firmly. And I see I quilted his little tail there a little bit. And then I'm going to sew his wings on. His wings are quilted a little bit also. I'm going to sew his wings on. And they tell you to use like wooden buttons. So I have some really cute wooden buttons. And what I think I'm going to do to make some little extra, and he's got a waddle. I've got to sew his waddle on still. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to embellish his tail with some buttons also, or some trim. I just want to do something to make him a little more fancy. I'm going to put some doll pellets in the bottom to weight him down so he won't be so wobbly also too. So I'm almost done with him. I was working on him this weekend and I just kind of stopped on him and got to working on some other things, but I'll probably try to finish him up tonight. I was going to put some doll eyes on him and I thought, nah, I don't think that I will, but because if you'll notice, his eyes look like they've got stitches, blanket stitches around them. So there's a lot of different interesting things I could do with him. So I haven't quite decided how I'm going to embellish him yet, but I've got some really cute wooden buttons, and I think that that may be the route that I go for embellishing. So there you go. So that is my patchwork turkey. So we'll put him over here. Now, I do have some yarny works in progress. I started not to show this because you've seen it, but I'm going to show it because I did work on my Helen Stewart shawl. I don't know what came over me, but I got engaged with it again. I did a planetarium show for the local 4-H group, and I took it with me, and I've done about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've done about 10 rows on it, so I'm about halfway through, or maybe a third of the way through, not quite halfway through, clue 3 now. And oh, I'm still in the middle of a doggone row here. But anyway, I did get the lace section in clue 2 done, and I've worked on the lace section, and now I'm up to the garter section in clue 3. I'm going to finish up with this light color in clue 3, and then start the dark the last little bit of the dark color on this, and then I'll be done. So I am, according to the chart, if you're familiar with Helen Stewart's patterns, they have the really nice layout on them that shows you exactly row by row where you are. I am 60% of the way done according to this. So if I can just keep chugging along and do a few rows, you know, every couple of days, I'm confident I will finish it by the end of summer. So that is the Impressionist shawl. You've all seen the pictures by now of what it looks like. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but you can see it. It's Curious Handmade, Helen Stewart, and there's the, and how well you can see that. There's the picture of it. It's a pretty shawl, and I am going to do the Pico bind off. I saw somebody I know that did one without it, and she's like, I really wish that I'd done it. I've never done a Pico bind off, so I don't have any predisposition to, oh my God, it's going to take so much time. So I think that's probably good. But anyway, okay, so my next work in progress, oh, and I forgot to say, this bag is Playful Otter's bag by April 9 Designs. She is on Etsy, and I like her bags because she sews a measuring tape inside them in case you don't have your measuring tape with you. So her bags are extremely well made. I really, really highly recommend them, and they are very priced very competitively, in my opinion. So April 9 Designs. And this is also one of her bags. This is one of her larger bags, okay? This one also, I believe, has the tape. Yeah, it has the tape sewn inside of it, okay? So this is housing my Kraken Shawl. Yay, I started it. I'll show the picture of it. This is a pattern by Two Hearts Crochet. She is the one who did the solar system crochet along. This is Pico crochet, and it's actually quite easy. You just have to keep track, and she provides a chart with the counts on it so you can keep track of where you're at. The yarns that I'm using are by Suutra Fiber Arts. I won't drag them all out, but Suutra Fiber Arts, see, it's kind of blowing out, isn't it? Let me get that up closer. This is her MCN Vase base, and the colorway is called Northern Lights. She is a indie dyer in Massachusetts, and she also is on Etsy. I noticed that there were some people that were unhappy because Etsy has raised their fees again, apparently. So, which I know that's tough, being a small business person. That's got to be challenging because every nickel and dime matters. So it's kind of hard to show, but this is where I am. You start on the long side on this and then work down to the smaller side. It is a triangular shaped shawl. So I'm about 6 or 7 rows in. I'm just starting the figure here. You can see it. It's going to be upside down for right now, but this is how far I am. I'm about 6 rows in on it, and I'm holding fingering weight yarn double. So it is going to be so pretty when it's done. But yeah, so that's where I'm at on that. It's just going to go faster and faster because you decrease every row. And so you start speeding along as you get closer to the end. I kind of like that because, you know, you're working down to smaller numbers instead of bigger numbers. It's kind of the diametric opposite of the Impressionist shawl, where you're going from, oh, this is going so fast, to, oh my God, there's 400 stitches on my needles. Oh, excuse me, Willie, I gotta get this yarn. Okay, well, I'm tangled up. Ugh. Hang on, Willie. All right, so got that done, or I'm working on that. So that again is in my April 9. That's the Kraken Shawl in my April 9 Designs bag, and there's her card. April 9 Designs on Etsy, and she's also on Instagram, so you can find her on there to kind of see what she's working on. Now, the last thing that I'm going to show, my friend Vanessa from the A Historian Knits podcast is doing a make-along that is sort of languishing whips. And I haven't showed this in a while, but this shawl I started last summer, okay? I started this last summer. It's the Reyna Shawl, and it's a very popular free pattern. I'm in the middle of a row on it too. It's a very popular free pattern. It's very simple. It's just rows of garter stitch, and then in between you've got rows of a yarn over eyelet lace, and you just keep on keeping on and keep on keeping on and keep on keeping on until it's where you want it to be, okay, in terms of size. Okay, this yarn is by Kimarie Knacks. It's a colorway called Hippie Chick, It is a fingering weight yarn, and it's got sparkle in it. You can see there. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. And she had said this is one of her favorite yarns to dye. And it was one of the first nice yarns I ever bought. And I bought it because I loved the name and I thought the colorways were really beautiful. So it is supposed to just take 1 skein of fingering weight yarn, but you can make it as large as you want to. There's my rolled up amount of it. And the reason it's rolled up is because the dogs got into it and got to messing with it and messed it all up. But anyway, so that is going to be eligible for Vanessa's make along if I get it finished. It has to be something that you started before April the 1st. So my Helen Stewart won't count because I started it April the 2nd. But anyway, it is in my Tesla Knits periodic table bag. And she actually donated one of these as a prize to the make along. So check her out. She is actually closing her Etsy shop when the fees go up. So if you've been looking at one of her bags, you better go ahead and buy it. Her bags are very reasonably priced, and they're the perfect size to stuff down in another bag or your purse or something to carry with you. And I, of course, love the periodic table, so I had to have this one. So those are my works in progress for this week. I've got some yarny ones and I had a sewing one. I have some other things that I'm working on, but I'm not ready to show those yet. But anyway, so now we're going to move on to future crafting. Okay, so for future, first, I'm going to show, I got me a nice cup, y'all. Look at that. Woohoo! Don't look at my nails because I need to get them done. I got me a nice cup. This is one of those Cool Gear tumblers that's insulated, but the cool thing about this is this has got a gel in between the layers that you can put it in the freezer, and so you get sort of the frosted mug effect. And after this summer, after being outside, you definitely want this. Although today has not been as boiling hot. It's only 88, so the heat index today is only 100 instead of 117, which is what it was this time last week. But we'll talk more about that in the farming section. So what am I working on in terms of future crafting? Well, I've got a few different things to show you. I don't have the pattern out, but Julia from the Happy Knitting Podcast has just published a sock pattern. It's her first sock pattern. What are you growling at? Are you growling at that stuffed goose hanging on the wall? What are you looking at? There's nothing up there. Willie's growling at something. I'll show you what I think he's growling at. You see that duck up there on the wall? He's looking at that, growling at it. I don't know why. I don't know if y'all saw that or not, but I'll go back. Hanging up there, that duck. That is a paper towel holder that I bought at an auction, or not an auction, a yard sale when I still lived in Oklahoma. So that thing, I've had it for 25 years. Little old lady had died. I missed a turn. I was trying to turn into a sort of a new age shop called Nature's Treasures, and it was on a divided highway, and I missed the turn, so I had to go up and turn around and come back. And where I turned around, I saw a sign for garage sale, so I stopped, and the little old lady apparently had sewn, and she had tons and tons and tons of fabric and half-finished craft projects and quilt tops and all this stuff. So I bought her wig case, which I still have. I bought that goose. I bought a big box of polyfill stuffing and a quilt top for $10. I still have all those things, but well, not the stuffing anymore, but I still have the duck and everything. But they were cleaning out all of her sewing stuff, and I thought, look into your future, Deborah, because this is the way it's going to be. But anyway, so back to what I was saying before Willie got interested in the duck. Julia from the Happy Knitting Podcast has come out with a sock pattern called the Couch and Crackers Socks, and she is doing a knit along that runs through the end of June. I have not cast them on yet. I'm getting behind on my sock making. I was trying to do the pair of socks a month, but I haven't even started, so maybe tonight or tomorrow I will cast on. I'm going to use this yarn. This is a yarn that I purchased from Craftsy. It's called Josh's Cat. Okay, it is just one of their Cloudborne fingering weight yarns. And I'm going to cast those on maybe tonight. I don't know. We'll see. I've been trying to, in the evenings, trying to sit and cast on or work on things. Again, I kind of got off track there a little bit because it was so hot and I would just come in just worn out. So what do you see? There is nothing there. That duck is not real. Or is it that stuffed cat? Probably that. anyway, he's spotted something over there that he's very concerned about. Anyway, so this is Josh's cat. All right, so I'm going to cast those on. Then, the next thing is a couple of sewing objects. Again, we're back to the printed panels. Now, I found this one cut out in my mom's things. Okay, this one is a little box. It's sort of a little Christmas decoration. It's called a puppy for Christmas, which we all know that that's not a good idea, right? Unless you absolutely know the person wants a puppy, because giving someone a pet for a holiday or a gift without their understanding or without their consultation is a terrible idea, right? We don't do that. No. But anyway, so this little, we'll say this is a toy, right? This is a toy doggy, not a real puppy. So he's in a little box here, and this was already cut out in my mom's stuff, so all the pieces are cut out. So I just have to sew it up, so I'm going to work on that. And then also, in my mom's things, I found another panel, and I'm a big fan of Halloween, which we have discussed before. I found the Goody Cat bag. Okay, it's a Halloween treat bag. And so you cut out the little parts of the cat and you sew him up. Now I have a little banner that has this same kitty cat with these same kind of fabrics on it that says treats down it. So I thought it would be really cute to make this bag and then just to make a little display like with a candy bowl and the treat bag and a little sign all together with my Halloween decorations. So, yeah, so all the little parts to the cat are here. You just cut them out, and you, what is bothering you? My goodness, you're just really concerned about that. I don't know what's going on with him. Anyway, so you put that all together. Now, what? Willie, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. What do you see? Is it the cat? Come here. Is it this? Is it that? I found this poor little stuffed cat at the thrift store, and apparently this is what's worrying him. Somebody made somebody a cat pillow, and they apparently didn't know how to sew very good. And this is this is how crazy old lady I am. I went, oh, poor stuffed kitty. I'm going to buy you and fix you. Oh, Lord. Look, they didn't know what they were doing, so they sewed him together all wrong. And they messed his little face up, so I'm going to fix him. That's what Willie's all worried about. Is that what's bothering you? Is the cat pillow? It's a sort of a neck pillow. I don't even know what it is, but I don't. Yeah, no, whatever. This will. Oh, mercy. Okay, yeah. I ain't right, as they say. Anyway, speaking of thrift stores, one of the treasures that I found some time back in a bag of needlework. Now, actually, I know exactly when this was. This was when my father was in the hospital at the end of his life. My father was a late life diabetic, and he had gone into a diabetic coma, and he was in our local hospital, and my mother and I would go to see him, and she would just wear herself out, because she was not a young woman at the time either. She was sitting there, and I said, let's go get some lunch, and let's go to Goodwill. And I found a comforter sack full of needlework, and I think it was $5, and it had like 20 or something needlework panels. Well, one of the things that was in it was this tablecloth. Now, what this is a stamped cross-stitch tablecloth, and it's got roosters on it and a farm scene. And this was, of course, my favorite thing in the whole bag, because anything to do with farms, you know, stuff, I'm all about that. So it's a stamped cross-stitch tablecloth. And so I'm going to finish it out and put it in the fair. So, yeah, that's kind of my thing. I like to find unfinished objects and to honor the maker who started them, because I'm sure, you know, in some cases their life probably ended before they were able to finish all the things that they were working on. Not that I would know anybody that was that way in my life. Me. I try to finish them. So last year I had found a christening dress that was cut out in a bag of stuff that I had bought, and we have a big yard sale here that they call it Bargains Galore on 64, and it's one of those where there's one weekend there's yard sales from like one side of the state to the other all along this particular highway. And I went, Miss Hayes and I, Miss Betsy and I went to it, and we got out very, very early on the first day, and I found, she was visiting with some people, and I found this Ziploc bag that had some vintage wool baby yarn in it and a half-finished baby ensemble. And the lady said, I'll take 50 cents for that. I'm like, okay. So I bought it and finished it. It had the little jacket and the little bonnet and the little booties. It was really, really sweet. So I finished that and put it in the fair, and then I gave it to a good friend of mine for her daughter as a gift, because I felt like she would be the one who would appreciate it. So anyway, so those are my future crafting things. So that's all of the crafty content. I am going to have a few acquisitions if you want to stick around for those. And if not, thanks for hanging out. But if so, let's carry on to acquisitions. Okay guys, so I just have a few acquisitions to show you this week. I've got some yarny ones, and actually I have a couple of gifts. The yarny ones are actually a gift. But the first thing that I'm going to show you, it's been a little bit since I bought a pen, but I bought this pen. This is the Smush official pen. Okay, Smush, if you're not familiar, is a cat that you can follow on Instagram. And she has a birth defect where her little face is kind of flattened. And her owner took her on as a little baby. She was abandoned as a little baby, and her owner rescued her. And now she has started this organization where she raises money through selling official merchandise to donate to a local animal shelter. And if you recognize the style and the card, this is actually a pen that was designed by Nattel from Nattel Draw Stuff. So you have to order it from the Smush website, but Nattel Draw Stuff is the one who designed it. And I couldn't resist anything that helps support animal rescue. I try to help out. So, and it's the first pen I bought in a while, so I kind of treated myself. Okay, this is an older acquisition, but I wanted to share this because I was thinking about Anthony Bourdain and how he tried to make us appreciate the whole world and how not to be afraid of other cultures and other people. And Lord knows we need some of that right now in the world. This is a little panel that I bought some time back, and it's called What a World. And if you look at it, I really think it's neat because it's got a ton of different information on it. Okay. If you look at it. And I actually made one of my little cousins a pillowcase out of this. And I think I'm going to make myself a couple of pillowcases out of this because I still have 2 of them left. I've got 2 panels left. But I like it because it's got some of the neat things about the different areas on it. If you look closely at it, it tells you a little bit about the cultures and the peoples that are there, and so it's educational, and it kind of brings the world together, and Lord knows we need that right now. Anyway. Okay, so a gift I received, Sasha's mom, when we had our girls' day, she said, hey, look what I found for you. It's a needle case. She had been shopping at our local craft store, and they had this on clearance, and she picked me up this really neat needle case. So I thought it was really sweet that she thought of me when she went in there. So she gave that to me when we had our last get-together to make baskets. Now, Vanessa from the A Historian Knits podcast and I have gotten to be quite good friends, I feel like, over, even though we've never met in person, I'm sure eventually one day we will. But we've kind of bonded over being female academics, and we've shared some thoughts about the world and things like that. And she was the first person to subscribe to my Ravelry forum, so I had sent her a little gift of some things that I had made. Well, she had contacted me and said, I would like to send you a birthday gift before we move, because they're getting ready to move to Colorado. So she said, I would like to send you a birthday gift before we move. And so the other day I was at home and the doorbell rang and it was the mail carrier and she had a gift and a box for me, and I was like, oh, cool, okay. And I open the box and get the card out and read it, and I was blown away. I was stunned, and I need to post a picture of these things on Instagram. I already thanked her privately, but I need to post a thing. I was so touched by the level of thought that she had put into this gift for me. I mean, I have a hard time accepting kindness. I think sometimes I don't take compliments well. I kind of, I don't think I'm worthy, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I was just the level of thought and detail and kindness that was put into this gift just blew me away. And it was much needed that day. It was just kind of perfect timing. So I'm going to share with you what she sent. The first thing, and she wrote little cards on each little package. I couldn't wait. I know it's not my birthday, but I couldn't wait. She said, this is a few of my favorite things. And so what she sent was a little sample of wool wash. Okay, a little sample of wool wash. And then this is a beautiful little progress keeper from Tilting Planet. I had been admiring this on her podcast, so she sent me it's a little progress keeper. I don't know how well you can see that. It's got little glitter in it. Oh, it's so sweet. And I like the little thing it's in. It reminds me of the things you get out of little gumball machines. And then, so that's by Tilting Planet, which, hey, astronomers love that kind of stuff, right? And then last but not least, she sent me this beautiful skein of fingering weight yarn. All right, and this is also by, can't read that because I'm getting old and blind and don't know where I put my glasses. But anyway, I'll show you the card. It's the cheeseburger stripe yarn. Okay, the cheeseburger stripe sock yarn. And it is colored like cheeseburgers. And she said, and we both like to eat them. By gosh, I do. I met Miss Betsy for lunch today. I didn't have a cheeseburger, but our local place makes really good ones. Isn't that pretty yarn? And it does have all the colors of a cheeseburger in it. So that's awesome. So that is their sock yarn. It is 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon. 460 yards. So I love that. So that was a wonderful gift there. So I'll put those all back in the bag. Well, that wasn't all there was. That by itself would have been a fabulous gift, and I was so blown away by that. Well, then she sent me this notebooks, and she said, it reminds me of some of your kids. And every once in a while in the background of this video, I'm sure you hear a donkey braying. So there's some donkeys in honor of my donks out there in the pasture. So I'm sure they will appreciate that commemoration. Then a very sweet thing that her daughter Amelia sent was she drew one of my bunny rabbits. This is Mr. Spots. This is my English Spot boy. I had posted his picture and Amelia saw it and drew it for me. So I'm going to hang that up in my bedroom. I love that. I thought that was really sweet. But last but not least, and certainly I was blown away by this, she had done a test knit of a shawl and she sent it to me. She said and she wrote a very sweet card, and I'm not going to go into what it said, but she said this shawl for several reasons reminded her of me. And I don't know what to say about this other than I am just super grateful for the gift and the kindness and the friendship. And Vanessa, I know you're going to watch this eventually, so thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, my cold little Grinch-like heart, which grew 3 sizes or how many ever sizes. So I really appreciate this. It will be worn with pride and fond thoughts of our friendship. So thank you very much for this. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than thank you. So yeah, so that is, and oh look, I found my glasses. But anyway, so that's all of the acquisitions for this week. So now we're going to move on to our section about science. Another visitor today. This is Muffins. This is another one of my dogs. And she is about 6 or 7 years old. She showed up actually the week we put my dad in hospice. Muff, muff. And yeah, so she is a part healer, and someone tried to dock her tail themselves, and they actually docked it so short that it causes her neurological problems in her back end, so she has trouble walking sometimes. But anyway, she's a good girl. Okay guys, so what's going on in my science world? Like I mentioned, I had done a planetarium show last week for a local 4-H group. One of my good friends and her family is very involved in one of our local county 4-H groups, and I had said that I would do a planetarium program for them. And it was a small group, but it was a really good group. Her kids especially are very, very interested in science, and so they asked tons of good questions, and I had a great time doing the program for them. I'm still teaching the 4-week Astronomy of Astrology class for the local sort of New Age Education Center. We have been having a pretty good turnout at that. And last week we talked about planetary motion and what retrograde and all that stuff physically meant in the sky. Like I said, you know, I think it's important that people understand, if they're going to throw words around, they need to understand what they mean. So if you're going to talk about Mercury being in retrograde, what does that physically mean in the sky? You know, I'm not as worried about what it means, you know, astrologically, but astronomically, I am kind of worried about what that means. So, yeah, so I've been doing that. And then I had a special sort of touchy-feely moment last week. One of my students, well, actually this year, 3 of my students who were my research students where I work at the 4-year university, we have a very active undergraduate research program. And I work with students and get them working on research projects. And sometimes, as I've mentioned in the past, that leads to really great opportunities. And 3 young men that I sort of shepherded through their early years of doing research all received their PhD this year. And one of them finished on this past Monday. He was actually one of my first research students and one of my you know, favorites. You don't like to have favorite children, but there's some that always stick with you. He actually is working with us at the university now as a visiting lecturer, and it would be wonderful if they could hire him full time, so we'll see if that works out. But I have stayed in touch with him over the years, and he was able to come back with his family to the area, and he defended his PhD this past Monday. He actually went to the same graduate program that I did and actually started out working with my PhD advisor, and then John retired, so he switched who he was working with. But yes, and so I'm very, very proud of all 3 of them for completing their PhD studies. They're all going on to wonderful, great things. And so I'm excited to see where they head to. So I had posted about it, and John, who's on Facebook now, said, "Oh, that's my grandkids," because he and his wife never had children. So his PhD students, we were always kind of like their kids. And so now I have my own kids. So, and what's neat is his PhD advisor was one of the founding fathers sort of the field of research that I am most interested in, and I was doing my work in. So we have a very proud family heritage there. So last week I had been talking a little bit about heat index, and so I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about temperature scales. You know, most places in the world use the Celsius or the centigrade scale, whatever you want to call it, but here in the U.S. we still use Fahrenheit. And so being able to understand what those are and kind of switch back and forth between them, I think, is useful. They're both what are called relative scales. Both of the gentlemen that created those scales picked 2 numbers that they liked to measure repeatable things. In this case, it was the freezing point of something and then the boiling point of something. Now, the Fahrenheit scale was first, and he actually used the freezing point of a saltwater mixture. And so that is why fresh water actually doesn't freeze at 0 on the Fahrenheit scale. It's because he was using a brine solution, so he could do a reproducible experiment. Because science has to be reproducible, or it's not science. But so that's why we have the extra 32. But what he did is he decided on these two numbers, and then part of the reason why he chose the numbers that he did was so that he could basically make equal marks by taking the boiling point, the freezing point, and putting a line halfway in between, and then taking each one of those segments and cutting those in half, and keep cutting things in half so that he could make equal marks. Relative scales means that they pick, someone picked the reference points, and then they figured out themselves how many marks they wanted to put in between them. There's all sorts of different temperature scales that are out there, and you can make your own. You might make, I might make the Willie temperature scale, where I make the freezing point 0 and the boiling point 5,000, and I put 5,000 marks. So 1 Willie 1 Willie degree is this, is a very small amount of temperature change. Celsius was kind of an unusual cat. If you read about his life history, he was an astronomer, and he realized that the freezing point of water was not dependent upon altitude as strongly as the boiling point of water is. The boiling point of water is very sensitive to pressure. And if you've ever read directions on like high altitude cooking and stuff like that, the reason that you have to do that is as you go up in altitude, water boils at lower temperatures, so it may not cook the food properly or safely. So you have to cook things longer at higher altitudes in a lot of cases to get them to cook properly, because the boiling point of water goes down. So what he did in his infinite wisdom was he made a reverse scale where 0 was the boiling point, which could be movable depending on what altitude you were at, and then 100 was the freezing point. So then you had all this reverse business, and that didn't last for very long. After he died, somebody actually reversed the scale and went, now we're going to do it this way. But the reason it's sometimes also called the centigrade scale is there's 100 divisions between freezing and boiling. And actually it's used a lot of times in science because it is directly related to what we call the absolute temperature scale, which is kelvins, which is based upon activity of molecules in a gas. So there is no, I pick these two numbers. There's either this much energy or there's not. So, but you can relate Celsius to that. So, but having said all that, the reason I wanted to talk about it is it's nice to be able to convert back and forth between the two. So I have made a little visual aid here on a piece of cardboard because that's what I could find. So this is how you actually convert. Now this, some people balk at the idea of doing math. So I'm going to tell you a little trick. So this is temperature in Celsius. You take that number and multiply it by 9/5, or 9 divided by 5, and get a number, and then you add 32 to that. So if I hear someone say in Britain talk about the temperature, I take that number to get the exact value and multiply by 9/5, and then add 32. And that's the temperature in Fahrenheit. So for example, 30 degrees Celsius is roughly 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you may say, that's a lot of math. Well, what I do to kind of ballpark it, to get an idea, should I wear shorts or should I wear long sleeves, is 9/5 is pretty darn close to 10 divided by 5, also known as 2. So 2. So you just double the temperature in Celsius and add 32, and that gets you in the ballpark, which gives you 92 if you do 32 degrees Celsius, or 30 degrees Celsius. So 92 and 86, the temperature difference there is not huge. Okay, so now if you want to go the other way, say I talk about a temperature here of being 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you want to know what that is in the UK, for example, so Antonia, if you're watching this, if you want to know what 100 degrees Fahrenheit is, you subtract 32, okay, and you get, what would that be, 68, is that right, 68, yeah. And then you divide or multiply by 5 divided by 9. Well, you're like, oh, that's a lot of math. Well, 5 divided by 9 is almost a half. So you basically just take this number and divide it in half. Okay? So the temperature in Fahrenheit, minus 32. So if it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit minus 32, that would be 68, right? Yes, 68. And then you would cut that in half, so half of that would be 34 Celsius. And if you actually calculate it out, it's like 37 really, if you do it properly, because 5/9 is not really 1/2. It's a little bit more than 1/2. But anyway, so that gives you kind of a ballpark on how to convert back and forth between the two scales. So yeah, so there's your little science lesson for today on a piece of cardboard. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of where we're at on the science stuff. So now we're going to come back and talk about farm life. Okay, so here on the farm, what's been going on? Well, we're getting a little bit of a break from the heat, thankfully. We had some ridiculous heat indexes last week. Even though we are not getting any rain, the humidity's been incredibly high, and we desperately need some rain. They've got a pretty good chance of rain tomorrow and the next day in the forecast, and I really hope we get some because it is very dry outside. I've been having to water my plants, my bushes and things like that. I've got some rose bushes that I just planted, and of course my seeds and everything like that, and hanging baskets. It's impossible to keep them watered almost when it's as hot as it's been. And the air it's humid during the daytime, but then the air gets very dry at night, and it kind of sucks all the moisture out of the plants. But things are doing okay in terms of that. I did have a loss this past week. I had picked up a young rabbit, and I don't know if it was the heat or what. She had water, she had a fan. You know, I'd gone out and checked on him at noon and given him some lettuce. And then I came back at 5 o'clock and she was dead. And it really upset me, and because she was just a baby. And it really bothered me a lot. So I have a place where I put my animals to rest, and that took her up there and took care of her. But it bothers you. I mean, that's part of life on a farm. Unfortunately, you do have to learn to deal with those things. But thankfully, everybody else seems to be doing okay. Keeping fans on the rabbits. I just went out a while ago and plugged them in because the temperature finally started to go up a little bit. We are due for some cooler temperatures for the next couple of days, thankfully, and I'm very glad for that. Both it makes it easier on my animals, and also makes it easier on my light bill because I'm not running as I said, a small municipal airport out back is what it sounds like. I did get chicks. Now last Friday, Jacob came and we worked on some things, some little nitpicky things here at the farm, and I took a cage to a lady who I had told her I would give her this big kennel cage, and she's where I got the rabbit from. Actually got two from her. The other one is doing fine, but the one, I don't know. And then I said, well, let's go see if the chicken man is home. He has a little greenhouse, and he sells seedlings, sells like vegetable seedlings and stuff. So I had been saving some trays and some pots and some things like that for him. I said, I've been needing to move these, so let's take him and see if the chicken man is home. So we went by to see him, and I picked up 12 chicks. I got some salmon faverels and some copper moran chicks. Luckily they are large enough now that they did not need to be kept in the house and brooded. They are big enough that he had them in an outdoor pen. They've got feathers. So what I've done is I've got them in a cage right now, a big cage, until I've got a baby pigeon, until the baby pigeon feathers out and is able to fly, because they laid the eggs on the ground for whatever reason this time, and the baby pigeon is on the ground, and so I don't want the chicks to bother it. So I'm going to wait till it feathers out and it can fly, and then I've got a big pen for the chicks to move into, which I've got secured because we were having some trouble. My neighbors were having some trouble with a raccoon killing their birds, so I don't want to put anything out until I'm sure the cage is very secure. But I did get chicks, so that's exciting. Took some minerals and stuff over to the cattle. We're up to 9 calves now, I believe. They're all looking really good. I've been giving my cattle salt licks and stuff like that to help with the ticks, and then I've given them a fly mineral to help with the flies. And it does really seem to be making a difference. They didn't have nearly the fly load on them I've seen in the past years. The pastures are looking good, although we could, like I said, we could use some rain. It would be really good if we could get some rain right about now, because the pastures will rebound fairly quickly if we get a decent rain. Yeah, so last night I went out and a little mini horse, she's still struggling with some pain issues, although it kind of comes and goes, and I don't know if she needs an adjustment, like a chiropractic adjustment, because I cleaned her feet out really, really good, and I did notice there was a rock in one of her feet, so I'm hoping that that will help with, because I had not, it was packed in there so deep I didn't see it the first time. I gave her a good trim on her feet, and that seems to have helped some. She's still eating and drinking and getting around, so as long as she's content, you know, she just moves a little bit slower than the rest of them. My vet is due to come next week and do shots, so I'm going to have her look her over and kind of maybe give me some advice on what's best for her, because I don't want her to suffer. I don't want her to be in pain, but right now, as long as she's eating and drinking, and she talks to me every time I go out there and comes up, you know, so she still seems to be making it okay. Yeah, well, what I was going to say about last night, I kind of got off track there. I was outside looking at the big horses. Well, my horse Chips only has one eye. He lost an eye to a fungal infection in 2009, right before we had that lightning strike that I talked about a couple of episodes ago. He had gotten a scratch in his cornea when he was at the trainers. Some sand had blown in his eye and scratched his cornea. So we had been fighting with that, and we had finally gotten it healed up. But once you compromise an eye, it's kind of always a little bit compromised. And that spring, we had a really wet spring, and he got a fungus in that eye. And it started melting his cornea. So I had taken him to the vet. I'd actually taken him and Angel to have Angel ultrasounded to see if she was pregnant. I had taken him to the vet, and she said, "We're going to lose this eye. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Is there any way we can save it?" So she got on the phone to the vet school in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And that's where she went and pulled some strings for me. And they said, "If you can get him here tonight, we'll do an experimental surgery on him to try to save the eye." Well, you know, fate had a hand in this, I guess, because my friend Carol happened to walk in the door right after she got off the phone. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" This was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And she said, "Well, nothing." I said, "You want to drive to Stillwater, Oklahoma tonight?" Because it was a 5-hour drive. And she said, "Sure." So she took her horse on home, and she's on the way. So I loaded Chips back up on the trailer, and off we went. We got him there a little bit before midnight. And they did the surgery, and they were very good to stay in touch with me. What they did is they took placenta and sewed it on the eye as sort of a living bandage. And they almost saved it. There was one little area they just could never get to stick, and so they ended up having to enucleate his eye. But he never has acted any differently. I mean, he's always been a good-natured horse, so he's not spooky. I've ridden him in shows. I've ridden him all over the place since then. He's just a very sweet, sweet, gentle soul of a horse. And so last night, I went outside and I was petting him and loving on him and spending some time with him. And I noticed that he had a piece of wire wrapped around his ankle on his back leg on the blind side. And I'm like, oh, great. And it was twisted in such a way that I couldn't just undo it with my hand. So I had to go inside and get a pair of pliers. And there's not one horse in a million that you can do this with. But he was just standing out in the pasture. You know, I'm out there in flip-flops, which is not smart, okay? Let me just make a disclaimer. It is not smart to wear flip-flops around horses. Don't do as I do, do as I say. But I'm out there, you know, I was just too worried about getting it fixed. And so I ran out there with the wire cutters and the pliers, and he just stood there and let me unwrap that wire and get it off of his foot. You know, just such a good, trusting, sweet boy. So I was very thankful. It had rubbed a sore place on there, so I put a little bit of medicine on it. But we got that fixed, thankfully. Yeah, so that's kind of what's been going on here on the farm. So a few things that I wanted to talk about. with riding, the kids last week we did a jump clinic where normally the person that teaches our jump clinic is my dressage coach, but she recently just had a baby, so she wasn't able to do it. So we did it ourselves, and we split the kids up where they worked with me on fundamentals, and then, well, actually, we split the kids up into the foxtrotter herd and then the herd of horses that have come from my place, which whether I've donated them or they're my personal horses. And one young lady has Sterling, who's the first colt I ever raised, and she doesn't ride him as often as he probably needs to be ridden, which, you know, I understand that life gets in the way sometimes, and when you're getting into high school, things get interesting about boys, and you start worrying about going to college and all this stuff. So she hadn't really ridden him, and she was really struggling with him because she was trying to correct him and discipline him. And I said, let's try something different, okay? Let's try, instead of getting on to him when he's wrong, let's try praising him when he's right, because he really loves people. He loves attention and he loves people. So I thought, okay, let's try, instead of getting mad and kicking him and frailing on him, I said, let's try praising him when he does what you want instead of yelling at him when he doesn't. Different horse. Totally different horse. He was very, very good for her after that. It kind of made me think about, you know, people are that way too. How many of us would really rather, instead of being yelled at when we're wrong, be praised when we do something right? And you know, that is something we can all take a page out of, I think. Let's try praising those horses when we're right, because those horses love us, and if we don't give them those verbal cookies, as I call them, they get sad. You know, they get really sad and down despondent. I mean, you've ever been to a trail riding franchise and the horses are just cranky and bitchy and bad mood? Those horses never get petted and praised like they need to. I mean, they're working all day long, and 90% of the people that go out there don't know how to ride probably, and they just get on them and they, you know, jerk their faces off or kick on them or whatever. Next time you do that, go and praise that horse. Tell that horse what a good horse it is. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and it maybe sounds a little touchy-feely liberal snowflake, but I don't care. It works. Everybody likes, even my dad. My dad always said even a mule likes a pat on the head sometimes. So we tried that approach, and it seemed to work much, much better. So anyway, so that's what we're doing. I flipped off the mounting block last week. I was having to get down to fix one of the jumps, and we have one mounting block that's not as stable as the others, and I was standing on the side of it, and I flipped it over, and I whacked my ankle bone. I had on my boots. I had on big, thick riding boots, and I whacked my ankle bone, and I did not really realize how much I had hurt it until Sunday, after working all day Friday with Jacob, walking 3.5 miles, playing Pokemon Go on Saturday, and then working all day Sunday on it. By Sunday evening, when I was looking down to take my shower, I'm like, my ankles are not the same size. And it was still really tender. So yesterday, I didn't ride. I taught from the ground, and then I came home and just put it up on a, I sat down on the bed and was, I'm still binge watching episodes of The West Wing. I've been listening to a podcast called The West Wing Weekly, where they kind of analyze each episode, and it's made me go back and rewatch them again, looking for these extra little things that they've been talking about. But I put it up, and it seemed to really help, because today it was much, much better. So that was good. But anyway, so some things that I've been working on here on the farm. I made some soap. All right. It's still in the mold, so I'm just going to show you it in the mold. This is a rosemary mint. It's supposed to be a shampoo bar. It's got a lot of jojoba oil in it. And I put it in this Tree of Life mold. So I haven't unmolded it yet. I need to do that this week. But this has, I actually had infused some olive oil with some rosemary that I had grown. And then I put rosemary essential oil, peppermint oil, and lavender oil in this. But it's got jojoba, sunflower oil, olive oil, and shea butter in it. So, and then also it has lye in it. So it has to cure. It's a true lye soap. So it has to cure again. But I actually don't mind working with lye. I always, just like I said a couple of weeks ago, I always just put it on my stove when I get ready to mix the lye solution and turn my vent fan on. And then I don't have to worry about any fumes or anything. And I always wear protection over my eyes and stuff when I work with it. So I made those, and then also I canned some elderflower jelly, I think that I had shown this, but it hadn't set up, so I went back and put more pectin in it, and it's set up finally. So this is my elderflower vanilla jelly. Then this is one of my favorite things to make. This is dark chocolate and berry spread. So this is berries from my berry bushes. It's got blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries in it. And you make a dark chocolate mixture with that. So I usually just buy the baking chips because they're easier to melt, and mix that together and make a spread. And you can it again in a water bath processor. I put a little bit of lemon juice in there to help with the acidity level. And so I canned that, and this is delicious. This blows Nutella out of the water. I'm sorry, but it does. I know Nutella's hazelnut, but this is some good stuff. Now, I had mentioned last week that I had rendered some lard, so here's my finished process on that. Some nice pretty lard that I can use for cooking, or I can use it to season my cast iron with. I usually keep these jars in the refrigerator to keep it from going rancid, or you could put it in the freezer if you have a lot. I'll probably actually put most of them in the freezer because I've got about 5 jars this size. This is a 1.5 pint jar, which I find it handy to do like asparagus in, but I didn't can any asparagus this year, so I'm using it for that. And then I also made and canned some bone broth in my pressure canner. I save my meat bones, whatever they are, in Ziploc bags in the freezer. I just keep a big Ziploc bag, and every time I have meat bones, I put them in there, and then I cook them with some carrots and celery and herbs and onions and things like that. I cook it down for a few days and let it really get all the good nutrients out of those bones, and then I pressure can this. So this is actually done in the pressure canner. So I want to talk a little bit about how to use a pressure canner, because a lot of people seem really afraid of them. You know, you always see the videos or the pictures with the pressure canner lid blown into the roof or whatever. And are they something you need to be afraid of? No. Are they something you need to have a healthy respect and understanding of? Absolutely. Okay? But let me tell you a secret. All these Instapots, guess what they are? They're pressure cookers, y'all. You know, everybody talks about, oh, how fast they cook. They're pressure cookers. That's why they cook fast, because they cook at a higher pressure. Just like we talked about in the science section with if the altitude is higher, water boils at a lower temperature. Well, if the pressure is higher, so you go down in altitude, water boils at a higher temperature, and it cooks things faster. So an Instapot is just a pressure canner. Or it's not a canner, it's a cooker. There's a difference between a canner and a cooker. But anyway, so let me make Willie get down, which he's not going to like at all, and let me grab my lid off my pressure canner. Okay, jump down, buddy. Alright, whoops. Okay, so I just brought in the lid. I didn't bring in the whole thing. So the first thing you've got to understand about a pressure canner is you need to maintain it. Alright, so when you take the lid off, there is this rubber seal. Now this one is brand new. I just replaced it. The nice thing about the companies that make these, you can order parts. They don't change. I've got my mother's pressure canner that was probably 45, 50 years old. You can still order the seals and the gauges and all that for it. Okay, so this is the seal. First thing you need to do is check your seal. It needs to not be cracked. It needs to not be stiff. It needs to be supple. Okay. Then you need to make sure your little pop-off valve is mobile. Okay. You need to make sure it's not stopped up, so you need to be able to see light through it. Okay. All right. Or actually, no, that's this one over here. You need to be able to see light through this valve over here. This one is actually solid. So, but this one needs to be mobile and not rusty. Then you need to look at the steam vent, and you need to make sure you can see through it. So you need to be able to see through that little steam pipe there. Now, the next thing is you need to make sure the pressure is reading true. Well, you can't really do that at home, but my county extension office, and I'm sure most of them do, they offer a free testing service where you can take your canner lid, you just have to take the lid portion in, and they will put this on a pump, and they will check the pressure calibration. If it's off, you need to replace it. I took both the old one that I was refurbishing and this one in last year and had it checked, and they were both off. When this one was reading 10 pounds on the scale, it was actually 14 pounds. and the other one was about 15 pounds, which is not enough to cause a problem, but it's enough that you need to have it fixed. Now you'll notice on the scale there, it's got different PSI, and then it gets into the caution region. All right. So you take it in and have it checked. Now the way this works, you'll notice it's got a locking lid. You put this on the body of the canner, you twist it to lock it. You need to make sure it's locked into place. When you first put it on, you may see some steam escaping as the seal sort of heats up and becomes malleable. But eventually what's going to happen is steam is going to start coming out of this pipe here, and this is going to push up to lock a seal. The way you raise the pressure is you use a weight. And you put a weight over the top of that steam pipe. Now this floats on there, and if the pressure starts getting too high, this will start tattling on you. It'll start rattling, or I call it tattling, telling on you that the pressure's too high. Here's the key. You can't go off and leave with this thing running. You can't, I mean, you might leave the room. Yeah, you can leave the room and go to the bathroom or whatever, but you can't go off and do other things or watch TV. I stay in the kitchen while this is running because the pressure is going to start to rise, and as the pressure starts to rise, you start adjusting the burner on your stove downward. Okay? You know, the ideal gas law says P times V, which is pressure times volume, equals a constant, N and R, which are constants, which we don't care about, times T. So as T goes up, and V can't do anything because it's locked inside this vessel where it can't get any more volume, the pressure is going to go up. So you want the pressure to respond to the temperature. So this is going to start to rise, and when it gets, on mine, when it gets to about between 5 and 6 psi, I will start turning my temperature down a little bit. I'll turn it down just a little bit, and it'll start to rise more slowly. And then when it gets to about 8 or 9 psi, because most things process at 10 pounds, you set it at 10 pounds and you turn it, you monitor that pressure. And by the time this is at 10 pounds, I've got my burner on my gas stove turned down to the lowest setting that it will go, because once it heats up in there, it kind of stays constant. You don't have to do a lot with it. But it'll sit and it'll do its own thing. When I made the broth, since the broth was already hot, I only had to process quarts for 25 minutes. Now here's what you do. When you get to your 25-minute mark, you don't touch anything here. You turn the stove off and you leave it. Now, people say, oh, you need to sit with it while it's cooling off. Now that I don't believe, because PV equals a constant times T. If you've turned your temperature off, your pressure has nowhere to go but down. So the pressure will start to drop, and eventually it'll get to 0. You don't touch anything. And if this is not reading 0, you don't take this off, you don't mess with this, you sure don't unlock the lid. You leave it, don't touch it. Some people leave it overnight even. But once this gets to 0, you need to wait at least 10 more minutes. Then you can take the tattler off, and I always lift it off away from me to let any steam escape. This should have fallen back down to its down position. It should not be up any longer. Then I unlock my lid, and when I open it, I lift it off away from me to let any last little bits of steam escape away from my face. Okay? But there is no reason to be afraid of a pressure canner if you monitor it. The reason the lid blows off of one is either it's defective and you didn't check it out. I mean, these are metal. This stuff is not going to break unless you've abused the heck out of it. The seal, the worst that's going to happen is steam's going to escape out of it. Okay? It's not going to blow off. The reason these things blow is people go off and forget about them, and the pressure gets too high. 99% of pressure canner failures are operator error. I promise you that. So if you sit with it and you're patient, you know, sit and knit, sit and read a book, keep an eye on it, and monitor the pressure. You know, if it starts getting too high, turn the stove off. Okay? But I keep mine right. I mean, you've got a long way to go, because caution doesn't happen until 20 pounds of pressure. So, you know, if it goes up to 10 or 11 or 12, you still can turn it down and keep the pressure well within safety limits. But you have to maintain your canners, and then you have to sit with them. You can't go off and leave them. So proper maintenance is key here. You got to take good care. Now, the thing is there's lots of resources out there. Presto canners have books with them, or you can go online and read their books. There's a website called SB Canning that's got good information. Ball and Kerr, the two companies that make jars, also have great canning. There's a book called the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving. That's kind of the Bible that I started with. There's tons of information out there. You need to know your canner's idiosyncrasies. But the main thing is make sure your gauge is reading right, make sure your seal is in good shape, and don't go off and leave it. And never, ever, ever, ever open it ever until this reads 0. Ever. Okay? If in doubt, leave it alone. Walk away, turn the burner off, walk away, let it cool completely down. It's not going to hurt if those things sit there 5 or 6 hours or 10 hours and you come back to it. It's not going to hurt a thing. Alright, so that's my spiel about pressure canning. I am no expert, but I am a scientist, so I understand the ideal gas law a little bit. So you can use that. Knowledge is power, y'all. It's a good thing to have. So no need to be afraid of them. Just have to have a healthy respect and understanding of them. Okay, so we're going to come back now and finish up with a few final thoughts. Okay, guys, I wanted to finish up with a few final thoughts today. Last week I was talking at the end about kindness, and I want to visit on that a little bit more today. We seem to be living in a time and a place in our existence where there are huge acts of unkindness in this world. And it's because of, people perceive these differences as making people subhuman or less or whatever. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of a political diatribe about it, but what is going on with these children at our southern borders is heartbreaking. Whatever your political point of view, I think we can all agree that children are innocent and should be treated humanely. At least I hope we can all agree to that. But as I said earlier, think globally and act locally. So show kindness to those around you. And even in our community online, kindness matters. I was heartbroken to read a post from Cassandra at Resonance this week. She's been doing the Walk the Block Mystery Knit Along. And there were a couple of mistakes in the patterns, and she corrected them quickly, and she apologized profusely, and people were just tearing her to pieces, apparently. And it hurt my heart so bad to read this post that she had put up about some of the things that had been said to her. It was just, it broke my heart. And I reached out to her privately and said, look, don't let the turkeys get you down. Just because they paid $5 for your pattern does not mean they own your soul. And that's true. I mean, yeah, we pay $5 for patterns and we expect a certain service. But at the end of the day, $5 is the cost of one of those fancy pants Starbucks drinks. You don't buy the right to be hateful to people for $5. You don't buy the right to be hateful to people ever. But especially not for $5. So be kind. Don't, if someone makes a mistake, ask them about it, but don't be hateful. I had a email from a student, and they were very hateful to me in it, and it turned out I was right and they were wrong. And I just said, I don't understand why you felt it was necessary to speak to me in this way. All you had to do was ask your question, and I would give you a direct answer, and that was it. But they felt the need to be hateful, and I guess it's because they were upset and frustrated, and I get that. But count to 10. What's that thing about think before you speak? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it helpful? Is it, true? Think before you speak. I think if we all took a breath and thought for a moment before we said 90% of what we say, we could figure out that we probably don't need to say it. And that's especially true on online forums. It's real easy to rip somebody to shreds if you don't have to see the look on their face. So be kind. I mean, come on, y'all. This world, you know, like I said last week, we're not getting out of here alive. We're all on this planet together, and we got to find a way to get along. The alternative is we're all going to kill each other off, and that's not really an acceptable alternative to me. I don't think it should be to anybody. But anyway, and part of that is, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I am very hard on myself. I have a very hard time accepting praise, accepting compliments, accepting kindness. I will internalize criticism a lot faster than I will kindness. And then, you know, and I'm not going to make this into a therapy session. That's just the way that I am, and I know this about myself. And so I have to learn to be open to love and to be open to kindness. And so I wanted to read a poem that was from a Facebook page that I follow. And the poem is called Pretty Ugly. And pretty is upside down and ugly is right side up. And the idea of the poem is the following. It's written by Abdullah Shawab, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that rightly. But I'm going to read the poem and then explain it. Okay, so the poem says, I am very ugly, so don't try to convince me that I am a very beautiful person. Because at the end of the day, I hate myself in every single way. And I am not going to lie to myself by saying there is beauty inside of me that matters. So rest assured, I will remind myself that I am a worthless, terrible person. And nothing you say will make me believe I still deserve love. Because no matter what, I am not good enough to be loved, and I am in no position to believe that beauty does exist within me, because whenever I look in the mirror, I always think, am I as ugly as people say? And then at the bottom says, now read it bottom up. So you've read it top down, now read it bottom up. So it says, am I as ugly as people say? Because whenever I look in the mirror, I always think beauty does exist within me. I am in no position to believe that I am not good enough to be loved, because no matter what, I still deserve love. And nothing you say will make me believe that I am a worthless, terrible person. So rest assured, I will remind myself that there is beauty inside of me that matters, and I am not going to lie to myself by saying I hate myself in every single way, because at the end of the day, I am a very beautiful person, so don't try to convince me that I am very ugly. So, my final thoughts for you today are reverse your thinking. You know, take the negativity and reverse it. Change your polarity. Change your way of thinking about yourself, about others, about the world. Because the world is too full of hate, and it's too full of unkindness, and it's too full of ugly. So let's reverse our thinking and see the beauty inside of each other. There is beauty inside of me, there is beauty inside of you, there is beauty inside of the world that matters. So let's take care of each other. So until we meet again, y'all be good to each other, y'all take care of each other, and peace out. Bye. Say bye, Willie. Bye. See y'all next time.